Hey everyone, this is James Restivo from Crocanian Software. Thanks for joining our webinar today. Looks like we're right at the top of the hour, so I'll give it maybe another minute or so for people to filter in and again get going with the topic we're talking about today, which is the Forms Designer tool. So let's give it another minute or so. I'll start around 2:01 or 2:02 to really dive into here. Yeah, so let's give it a couple minutes and we'll get started. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. It looks like we don't have too many more people filtering in, so that's great. And this is being recorded, so if you want to access this webinar afterwards, that's fine. But okay, let me go ahead and get started. My name is James Restivo. I work for Crocanian Software. Today we're going to be talking about our Forms Designer, but I also want to take the conversation a little further and talk about how you can tie those forms into workflows and business processes and touch on a few other aspects in NITRO Studio. Just kind of give you the full picture of what we have in our suite of software. A little bit about Crocanian. We've been in business for 20 years now. We started out with IT help desk software and have branched into other programs and other tools. So we have the NITRO Studio tool as one of those options. And it's really what we're pushing as we really believe it is a valid and viable and probably really the best InfoPath replacement option you have out there in the marketplace right now. So we're going to switch over to the next slide here. There are a couple of handouts available from the GoToWebinar window. There's a data sheet talking about InfoPath replacement. And then we also have a case study from our friends over in Hawaii, Hanu Services. They did a migration from InfoPath to NITRO Studio, so you can read about what they did and what's done for them and how it all worked out. So feel free to download those and take them with you. So first I'm just going to give a little teaser also here on the upcoming webinar we have in October. We're going to be talking about application design using NITRO Studio. So there's really three pillars that we talk about. There's UI, UX, there's workflow and business process automation using the workflows and custom actions. And then we also have a reporting tool as well. And I'm not going to dive into these in too great detail today because we're really going to focus on the forms aspect. But do be aware that this is coming up October 24th. We'll have a webinar on the application design piece of it and talk about these things in a little more detail. And then, hang on a second. I've just been made aware my slides are not showing, so I apologize for that. I'm going to go ahead and reshare. And let me back up a second here. There we go. Okay. So here's the data sheets I was talking about. So I think that's where I left you guys. This is the next slide that you probably didn't see. These are the three pillars I was talking about: the UI, UX, workflows, and reporting. And then here's a little more information about those. Like I said, October 24th, we'll be doing a thing on that. And just a quick note, here's a comment directly from Microsoft about InfoPath. And if you're using InfoPath as the basis for creating forms in your add-ins, now is the time to start thinking about migrating your forms to other solutions. Now, this was from April of last year. So if it was the time then, it's absolutely, definitely the time now to think about this. So there's also a couple notes here about the end of support for InfoPath. Of course, Microsoft always reserves the right to move these out further as they deem fit. But the reality is they're not developing on InfoPath anymore. It's an outdated technology, and it's really not in anyone's best interest to continue to develop on the InfoPath platform. Okay, so just Oh, and just before I get into the NITRO Forms, just want to point out there is a questions box on the GoToWebinar screen. So if you have any questions at any point during this webinar, please feel free to ask them there. I'll try to address all the questions I can during our allotted time. If not, I'll either go over time or we'll follow up with you afterwards. We also have Ryan Stefani from Crocanian on the call who can help answer those questions in real time as you ask them. So absolutely feel free to pop a question in there at any given time. And we'll be also sharing the slide deck afterwards for everyone. Okay, so here's some information about NITRO Forms, a couple of quick points. They're dynamic, responsive, mobile friendly. There's layouts where you can do tabs and sections, table layouts. We'll talk about some of those things today. We'll talk about repeating rows using associated items. We'll talk about a little bit about permissions. Really, to go through every aspect of NITRO Forms would probably take 2 or 3 hours. So I'm just really giving you a high level taste of what's available, and certainly feel free to follow up with us at any time for a one-on-one demo. We can, or even a trial. So we can even get this in place on your site for a 30-day trial, and you can play around with it and see how you like it. And then a couple of the other things I'm going to talk about are these workflows and actions that you can tie back to the form. So it really makes it a full application creation platform, a really full replacement for the InfoPath world that you're coming from. So with that, I'm going to jump over to our demo. So just give me a second and pop over there. All right. So you should be seeing a list settings screen here for tickets list. So I'm coming from our IT Help Desk solution, which is one of our out-of-the-box solutions. And I'm doing that because we already have a bunch of forms configured and we have some things already there. So it just makes it really easy to show you what's going on with the site. But I want to show you, you can get to NITRO Forms quite easily from the list settings. So once you have NITRO deployed on your site, any of your lists and any of the SharePoint sites that you have will have this NITRO Forms link, along with some other links we have. Print Manager, I'll talk about that a little bit because I know that's something a little lacking in the Power Apps world. And then, as I mentioned, I'll talk about custom actions as well. So to get to NITRO Forms, you click on it. I already have it open over here. You can see I was kind of playing around pre-webinar with some things, so I'll just take those off, take a couple of these things off. We have the form here, which can be laid out with tabs or it can be laid out with sections. So it gives you option for showing it across the top or across, vertically, and that's based on how you want to present the form and maybe based on the type of form you're trying to create for your users. And there's a whole bunch of other sections here. Again, like I said, just real high level. If you have any questions, let me know. But I'm just going to kind of jump into the meat of these things. So if you want to add new tabs or new sections to your form, it's really easy to do that. You have your tab control. Just go and drag and drop it over here. You create a new tab. If you want to add your form controls to that tab, really, again, super simple. You have all your form controls over here on the left-hand side. And what these are tying back to the columns for the SharePoint list on which you're creating the form. So you don't have to make that extra connection between a form control and a SharePoint list column. It's already done there. It's already there as part of this part of the forms tool out of the box. And one of the other great things about it is you don't have to come out of this interface to create a new column for your list. If you don't find it over here in your form control section, you can simply go to the Create Column button at the top here, and it's going to bring you to the standard SharePoint Create Column interface. So that should make it pretty easy for you to create and add columns. And then to actually just add them to your form, it's a drag and drop WYSIWYG interface. Just go and bring it onto your form, and there it is. You also have some options for changing a number of columns on your tab. So if you wanted to kind of lay it out a little differently, you could do that. There's options for adding HTML controls. There's options for adding table layouts. So let me actually show you the table layout and the HTML control. So if we go add a table, add a 1x3 table here, it allows you to better control how your columns are laid out on the form. So we can add in our columns right here to the form, like so. And we also give you options over here on the left-hand side to hide or show the column labels. Let's say you wanted to hide them completely. You could do something like this, where you hide that column label, We'll hit apply. And now you see just the text box. But in the back end, you know that's going to be writing back to your request or email or whatever the field is that you're wanting to have filled out. So it gives you a way to show it in a kind of a way more people might be used to. And then I mentioned the line HTML controls. This is really great because it gives you a way to add any kind of text you want to your form. So you can add example text. And what you can do is apply that. Now you have it there. Maybe you want to center it. You can go ahead and do that. Maybe you want to make it red. You can go ahead and do that. You can make it bigger if you want to do that. So you really play around with the settings. And so the HTML controls and the table layout, I think, are the best options for you to get a layout of the form in the way you want it. And kind of show you an example of that. I have an extreme example. One of the things I've done here is this, if I click over to this table layout, everyone's familiar with the W4 form, I imagine, or if not, you can probably imagine a government issued form that has a lot of specific ways it's set up. This I've done, this took me about an hour to set this up. So I got some line HTML controls in a table at the top here. I have some other line HTML controls where I've entered some text. Same here, we got a table with some of those HTML controls. And I've actually even added some shading to the columns. So, I've overread the column description. I've added some shading here, which you can do through cell properties and the table layout. Again, you can see there's a lot of different options and settings here. So you can really dive in and do a lot, but you can see I made this kind of light blue color to the background to highlight those fields. And that's basically what it looked like on the IRS website when I took a look at it. Now, I know there might not be a real use case for this for a W4 form specifically, but you can kind of see how you can take any PDF or Word developed form and with a little bit of time and effort, you can replicate it here in the NITRO Forms tool. And just as a point of reference, this took me about an hour to create. It wasn't that long at all. And with a little bit more time, I can make it even closer to what the government has issued for the form. Now, so far, we've talked about things here that are mostly about form layout. And so there's a lot of options here to get the form to look the way you want it to look. That's that UI UX element. Now, the next step in developing these forms and developing your applications or workflows or business processes is to have other events or actions happen on the form. And there's a couple of ways you can do that with NITRO Forms right in the designer interface, and then also tying into our custom actions tool and workflows tool. So you see on the actions side of things, we have a script action. And what you can do here is take that script action, and what it's going to allow you to do is add in your own JavaScript if you wanted to. So you can extend the form that way. But we actually have this whole custom action tool, which is a way for you to develop your own actions that aren't necessarily tied into script. You don't have to know script. You can just use the custom actions tool to do a whole bunch of cool things with it. On the form itself, there's also options. Again, you can do a custom JavaScript option where the difference here between this custom JavaScript and that script action is that you're going to be running this script every time the form loads, whereas this is only running when the button is pressed. Custom CSS you can add to the form. That's certainly doable. Then we also have these form event actions, which is kind of a cool way to manage the data on your form. So one use case here in our IT help desk example is, let's say you want to do something when a column changes. So let's say a category changes to something else, or maybe some other columns change. And you want in your request status, like let's say you set a request status or a certain status to an end point of being closed. What action we want to take from here is going to be to reopen that form. So we're going to reset that request status to in progress, for instance. So that is one way you can kind of manage the form and manage the flow right from the form interface itself. And I talked about the custom actions and the script actions. I'm going to dive into custom actions a little more too. So now we're going to kind of jump away from the Forms Designer interface and talk a little bit about what flows you can put on the back end. So there are two different ways that you can add flows to, or your workflows to this form or to this process. You have custom actions where you have a particular button that you press that runs a set or one action or a set of actions. This one we have configured here is a very simple self-assign button. What it's going to do is run a process to take the logged in user and add them to a field on the ticket or on your SharePoint form. You can see there's a whole list of other options that you can add here. So you can create items in other lists. You can create update items in this list or other lists. You can even upload or generate documents, send emails. Again, you can execute a script, invoke a web service, invoke a workflow, invoke a custom action, another custom action. So it really gives you a breadth of options for managing and creating a business flow when a button gets pressed. Then the other side of things is this workflow tool we have, where it is kind of the way I think of it is that custom action is going to be your manually invoked workflow, whereas the NITRO workflow tool here is going to be more about event-based or timer-based situations. So when an item is added to the list, you want to send a notification, for instance. So this is an item is created, we're going to send an email to someone, and then we're going to update an item somewhere else. And you can see there's options here very similar to what you have in custom actions with creating, updating, and deleting. You can send email. You can there's a whole query list option where you can go and query another list or related list and bring that information into the current list or use it in a workflow. Manage permissions and invoke workflows. So there's quite a bit you can do with the workflow tool as part of it. Now, you can use a combination of these. As you can see, there's a scheduled user triggered option, which actually will invoke, when you have the invoke workflow action set up here on this side, that's what it's going to be looking for. So you invoke a workflow, you have a user triggered workflow on this side. It means it kind of extends the process and allows you to, between the two of them, you can really scope out a detailed process for your businesses. I'm going to touch on a few other things here real quick about outside of the forms design piece of it, though this is kind of related to the forms designer aspect, is the whole portal interface. So we have this whole portal interface where you can have your end users have this sort of separate interaction with the program, and you can even create your forms on here. You can copy and paste your settings. There's actually a way to export and import your form settings, so you could do that and bring your settings over here to create the same form on the portal side. And the great thing about this is totally mobile responsive. The form itself, NITRO Forms, is totally mobile responsive, but this portal is very mobile responsive, and this is your answer for a mobile deployed interface for your applications. So you simply create what you want to create on here. You can add your links to different list views. You could do search pages, so there's a search for a knowledge base here. And then you have the form itself. And I'll just show you real quick. Hopefully this will show up on the webinar well. But if we scrunch this down, you can actually see how the form has reoriented itself to the size of the screen. So this is the responsiveness of it. And then you can see those links are over here. We'll click on View My Tickets. So really kind of gives you that answer for having a mobile interaction with your application right in the system. So it's right there in NITRO Studio for you to use. Then one other thing I want to touch on real quick that I know is lacking in the Power Apps world is this print manager tool, where we have a print setting. So we don't have any configured at the moment, but what you can do is create a you can design a whole template for creating your printout. So you've got this rich text with column placeholders, so it really gives you a way to, you can do full HTML text on there. It gives you a way to really take the information that's in your form or your SharePoint list and bring it into a print template that makes sense if you need to print something out or save it as a PDF or email it to someone. All that information is going to be there. So it's a real nice add-on to the whole process. Okay, let me see. And then so I'm going to jump into questions in just a moment. So if you have any questions, absolutely feel free to pop them into the screen. The next thing I'm going to touch on real quick here is examples of forms that we've developed. So if you want to take a look at all of the forms, we have this NITRO Forms showcase on our website. under InfoPath replacement, you can look at the form showcase, and it's going to show you different options, different things that we've developed here. Now, they don't all have to be branded with Crow Canyon. That's just something we did as part of this, but you can put your own branding on there. So you have something as like this, where you have this kind of wizard mode at the top, where you click the construction type and it changes what's visible in the form. Servers type is going to change what's visible in the form. So it kind of gives you that wizard mode aspect. Then you can do things like kind of somewhat simple as travel expense reports. You can do data access request forms. Laid out this way, and they also have the signature pads on there. You have access to information request form. Then we have this, kind of looks like more of a government design form, kind of a la the W4, where you have this layout, and again, using those table controls, HTML controls, you can really make the form look the way you want it to look for your end users. So it kind of gives you a really full breadth of options available in the Forms Designer tool, and the ability to add on workflows and custom actions and buttons. You can have buttons on here, those submit action buttons and things. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and jump over to the questions and just see what we have available. I know Ryan's been answering the questions, and if there's any other ones out there, feel free to go ahead and add them in here. So it looks like, there's a question about adding padding to the left or the right with line HTML. You can actually do that with the line HTML control sort of adds to the top or the bottom, but you can add to the left or the right through other ways. So you can use column settings where you have, let's say you have this tab. Let me go ahead and delete this here. Actually, you know what? I'm going to add the table. So there's one way to do this where you can add a table. And you can control the size of these cells. So if we do a cell property here, you can do cell padding around the cell, but they can also add some padding around the value, around the label. But it gives you a way to kind of change the size of this. It looks like you can change the size of this cell. So you can have your column right here in the middle, let's say. And then you can add your padding to the left or right, just scrunch those two labels down. So that's another way to do it as well for adding padding to the form. All right, let's see what else we have here. So connect to SQL Server Oracle data. Perfect question. I did not touch on the external data columns. So let me touch on that real quick. Under the advanced, it's under the form settings option. We do have this option for external data columns where you can create configuration and connect out to your SQL server. So I think right now it's set to SQL. I'll have to get with my dev team and get an answer for you on the Oracle side of it. But absolutely from SQL Server, you can bring in information to a column on your list. And more broadly, if you wanted to connect to SQL, we have data sync services that will bring information from a SQL table into a SharePoint list. So you can kind of do it at a couple different levels. You can bring it into a column on the form for a lookup. Like say you have a table of accounts in their SQL database that you want to look up to. You can use this query string and query parameters to get that information and show it on your form. But then if you want to bring all those accounts into SharePoint directly into a SharePoint list, you could have that option as well. All right, looks like we're getting some great questions here. So let me expand this out a little bit so I can see them all. Okay, so how is it deployed to SharePoint Online tenant? So this in the online world, it's going to be deployed as an app in your tenancy. So all the data and everything is going to be hosted right in your SharePoint. So this is not a SaaS solution that's sending the data out to a different service. It's all right in your SharePoint online solution. We do have some hosted elements with the workflows and a couple other things, but it's really just for those settings to run the workflow. The data itself stays within your SharePoint environment. Oh, another great question about the repeating rows. Yeah, I did not talk about that. I apologize. I skipped over that piece of it. So let me jump into the repeating rows side of things. So in the NITRO Forms tool, we have this concept of associated tasks. And so this is a list, a subtask list that is in our SharePoint site. And so we've connected to it using these associated task settings. So you have this associated item settings screen, and you see there's associated tasks and time tracking right here. You can see it right here on the Forms Designer tool. And this allows you to make a many-to-one relationship between that task and the parent item. So you can use this for project. We use this for project management internally pretty frequently, where we have a list of tasks that are assigned out to particular individuals with due dates on them, maybe some other metrics about what they need to complete, and then we can add as many of those tasks as we want to the parent item. So it's real straightforward way to do it. You just have a separate list that is containing each of those rows, and we're going to be showing those rows on the parent item through this associated item settings tool. Okay, so we have another question about separate different screen layouts from print layouts for the same data. This is also in format. Yeah, that's actually exactly the way it works today. You have a form layout, which is what the user is interacting with. And so the question is about having a different print layout than what you're seeing on the form. And that's the way it works today. So you have a form layout, which is what you're designing through this Forms Designer tool. And then you have a print layout, which is what you're designing through this Print Manager tool. So the Print Manager tool gives you the options to have that full HTML control option, so you can lay it out. You can lay it out like the form itself, or you can lay it out completely differently. In our PRPO tool, purchase request tool, we have a whole purchase order form that's pre-configured there, and obviously that's open for customization for users because their PO might look a little different, have some different information on it. So you can really kind of make it yours, make it your own with the Print Manager. So you have that ability to have the form layout look one way and then the print layout be completely different. It's really just taking the data that you have in that form, however it's laid out, and putting it into a different kind of form. And a question about exporting repeating data. So we'd be relying on there for the exporting of repeating data. So the question is, can you export the repeating data neatly, which you cannot do with InfoPath? Since it is tying into a SharePoint list, you can export the data as you would any data from any SharePoint list. So if you wanted to export those subtasks, you could filter them down by user, filter them down by due date, filter them down by the parent item related to them. And then you can use the export to Excel feature to take that data and bring it out. As I mentioned before, we have a data sync service tool as well that allows for automatic exporting of data to a SQL data table or maybe some other type of table. So you can use that tool as well, depending on what you need to accomplish with exporting of the data. And so then we had a question about, this is a good question, kind of jumping back to the beginning of what we're talking about today. How do we start modifying the lists? And I might breeze over that a little too quickly, so I apologize if anyone missed it. To get to the NITRO Forms tool, there's actually a couple different ways to do it. So I showed you in the beginning of the webinar about how to do it from the list settings page. So you can go to Crocanon NITRO Forms right here from list settings. Now, if we wanted to do it from the list ribbon, we can do that. So let me just show you, if we jump over to site contents. As my internet's been a little slow, which is why I popped up all the windows ahead of time. So bear with me here while I kind of pull this up. It might take a little time to get going. But from the tickets list itself, we're going to go directly to it, and you'll see that there's options for accessing some of these other NITRO features as well. You can get to custom actions from the list ribbon, as well as there's conditional formatting, which I didn't even touch on today, but that's a vital part of project management. If you want to use KPIs and things like that, you can do custom formatting to for that aspect. So bear with me here while this comes up. We'll go to our tickets list. Hopefully this won't take too long. Okay, good. So either from the modern interface or from classic, this happened to pop us up into the modern interface, which is fine. It's still going to show you that NITRO Forms option. So you see that NITRO Forms tool right here. You have the print settings tool, so you can get to that. You can go to conditional formatting. I think that's that's about it from this ribbon. Oh, custom actions right there as well. So you can get to those, all those tools from the list ribbon itself. And then if we go to classic SharePoint, all those things are still going to be there, just in the ribbon at the top rather than right above the list view. So same things, custom actions, email manager, all that is still there. And NITRO Forms is here as well. So you can get to it from any of the either modern UI or classic UI. And so various ways to get to where you want to go. And well, you can also go to the NITRO Studio screen and get to NITRO Forms that way. So there's a few other options to do that. Let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, well, oh yeah, it looks like we're at the, done the full half hour, but if anyone has any other questions, feel free to pop them in. I'll spend a little extra time to go over them. Otherwise, if you want to email us directly with a question, that's fine too. We can go ahead and get that answered. And as I said, if you want to get it installed as a trial on your site, if you reach out, we'll get you the installation package and you can go for it. So this is available for Office 365. This is available for on-prem down to SharePoint 2013. So you can use it in any of those environments. You can use it in hybrid environments. It's really there for anything 2013, 2016, 2019, and SharePoint Online are all, it's all supported for the NITRO Studio tool. As far as we did have a question about the licensing, and we usually license it per user, but we can also do it per site. So there's a few different options there, and we can work with you to talk about what's going to work best for your, for your scenario. And feel free to reach out to our sales team for that, sales@crocanon.com, for any follow-up, for any demos, and we'd be happy to have a conversation and talk more about this. As you tell, I could go on all day about this stuff. I love it. I think it's great. It's a really cool tool. So really hope you got some good information out of this webinar, and look to our next one. We'll have another one coming up in September. And then Ryan's going to be doing another application webinar at the beginning of September. I forget what that one is on. Oh, there is a slide actually, right? I just got reminded there is a slide. So let me jump back over to our PowerPoint slide. Hang on a moment, please. Where is this? Sharing.
While you're loading that up, James, too, I can kind of talk about it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the webinar in September is going to be around this new idea that we're putting into place, specifically around our portal. So it's, think of this as like this application is like a request management system for your entire organization, employee self-service portal. So the idea is that we're putting this common landing page in place where your end users can navigate to this site, this portal, and be able to request, send a request to any department within your organization, whether it's IT, marketing, HR, facilities, onboarding requests. They're all going to have access to those forms from this one common interface, and then have the request be routed to the appropriate department on the back end. So we're going to be covering that in more depth, and really just the architecture of how it sits within your Office 365 tenancy or your SharePoint farm, and then what it's going to look like from a back end perspective as well.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Ryan.
No worries.
Very much appreciated. So we'll get that. So sign up for that if you're interested, and we will see you at the next one. So thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate it. Again, follow up with any questions, or if you want more information, that would be great. And have a great day. Take care.